Okay, we'll get started. I'm Heidi Minsner. Thanks for joining today. I'm a program manager on the Global Financials Management team for AX. And with me today is Jill Carter, also a program manager on the Global Financials Management team. And this session is all about consolidations using Management Reporter. I do have to show you the slide. I'm sure you haven't seen it all today. The information that we're showing you today is available in market, so you can disregard. So basically the flow of this session and what we're going to do is we're going to start with some most basic scenarios from a consolidation perspective and keep building and iterating on that report to some of the more complex scenarios from a consolidation standpoint. This slide is really just discussing a typical month-end process for organizations and the tasks that you would typically do within AX, and then the tasks that you can do in Management Reporter if you're not already doing them. So things like running your adjusted trial balance, running your preliminary consolidated financial statements, and then running your final financial statements for review are all things that you can be doing in Management Reporter. There's some capabilities that were introduced in CU7 that extend or really allow us to be able to talk about using Management Reporter in some of the more complex consolidation scenarios. So currency translation was a big item there. So if you haven't looked at CU7, please do. We're anxious to get your feedback. But we'll walk through some of those scenarios as we go through the different flavors of consolidations. Do any of you use or have you used Management Reporter at a customer site for consolidations specifically? Great. We really like to discuss consolidations from a reporting point of view and also consolidations from a general ledger point of view, which is what I would call the capabilities that are inherent in AX, to see how we might build a better story around consolidations, whether it be from the GL point of view or reporting point of view. So any of you that are interested in having those conversations, we're very open to, want to learn about the different scenarios that are out there. So please give Jill or I your card at the end of the session if that's something you'd be interested in. But some of the benefits of using Management Reporter, those that are using it for this purpose would know, is that it's not just limited to the data from a general ledger perspective. You could also do consolidations on all the data that comes into Management Reporter. So budgeting, budget control, and budget planning data. So you have some additional capabilities. You can, of course, drill back from a Management Reporter report into the voucher inquiry to see the source or the origin of the transaction. You can include as many or as few of the dimensions in the consolidation from a reporting perspective. And to the next bullet, it's just report generation. There's no wait time in having to go through that consolidation process. Additionally, you can bring in data from other Microsoft Dynamics ERPs into a consolidated report or other systems using Excel as a data source. And then you can view multiple reporting currencies. We talked about that already, and we'll show some of that in the examples that we walk through. So here's the flow for the demos. We're going to start with a very basic consolidation, single company, same chart of accounts, same fiscal periods. We'll do that same basic consolidation, but we'll include capturing the eliminations between the two organizations in our example, and then extend that to eliminations with minority ownership. So we'll subtract the controlling interest from one of the organizations, and then go into including data outside of Microsoft Dynamics into the consolidation, dealing with multiple or different charts of accounts across companies, and then finally different reporting currencies. So we'll keep building on that same that example and extending it. And I'm the lucky one that is going to do the basic flows, and then Jill will come up here and do the more advanced flows. So I'm going to switch over to the machine here. And again, this is the basic consolidation, same chart of accounts, same fiscal periods. So here I'm just going to open the report just so you can see the information from a report definition perspective. Again, we have our row and our column, and in this case we have a reporting tree. So again, because our chart of accounts are exactly the same, we don't need to make really any modifications to the default summary income row definition because they are the chart's the same. And then basically all we're going to do is add a reporting tree to this report definition that, one row for each company, and then the amounts will be aggregated and I could view the information by company. So it's as simple as applying that reporting tree, and I'll just generate the report so we can see here's the aggregated total. And then if I wanted to view information by company, I can just select that from the reporting tree, and now I'm viewing the information for that single company. So it's pretty basic. How many encountered the basic scenario? Okay. So basically, just to recap on that, all you have to do is build a reporting tree for multiple companies. I'll save from going back to the slide for that. But building on that, now if we were to include eliminations, the intercompany, or eliminating the intercompany transactions, I'm just going to bring up a different reporting definition. So this income statement with eliminations. And basically, the row definition is the same because we're still talking same chart of accounts. Now we just want to back out the eliminations. So I'm going to open the column definition. And here you can see we have there's 3 companies now in our consolidation, and we have USMF, retail, and DEMF. This area is going to produce the summary for each of those companies, then with a total. And then we have this area for eliminations, and this is going to pull in the amounts just based on this account range. So we've picked the particular accounts that are our intercompany accounts, and that's all that's going to be reflected in this column on the financial or the income statement. However, it's also set to non-printing. So in this case, I just want to have a column to collect the amounts. I'm actually not going to print it, but I'm going to use it later in a calculation. So we did the same thing for USRT and DEMF. So, just filtering this column of information to those accounts which are intercompany. Then in row I is where I have a calculated column for the elimination. So this is basically adding FG plus H. Here you can see my calculation. And this one will be the printed row. So we'll have our three companies with a total. We'll have our elimination total. And then we'll do a final calculated column for our consolidated total, which is the eliminations less the consolidated amounts or the consolidated total for those 3 companies. Make sense? Okay, so let's look at the report. So here again, I'm using the same row definition. This time, here's our information for each company with our total. Again, that's a calculated column. Here's our eliminations, which is the sum of those 3 non-printing columns. Might have some rounding issues going on here I need to deal with. And then here's our consolidated total minus the eliminations to arrive at our consolidated amount. Okay, let me switch back to the PowerPoint. So basically what we did to create this report, we still have the reporting tree with the multiple companies, so that hasn't changed. So I could still filter that down. You use the column definition with dimension filters to restrict the amounts for that column based on the account ranges that I picked, which were my intercompany accounts. And then we created a column to subtract those eliminations from the overall total. So next we'll move on to subtracting minority interest as its own line on the financial statement. I'll flip back. So in this case, I have made an adjustment to the row definition for this report because I want that minority interest to appear as its separate line. So it's basically just an extension of that summary income statement row definition. And you'll see here there's an extra row for less non-controlling interest, and it's a calculated row. And again, I can get some help on building this calculation through double-clicking, but basically what this is saying is if the unit where we have the summary of USMF, that's on our column definition, so for only that company, then this row, net income, multiply it times 0.1%. Otherwise, if that's not true, it's 0. So but remember, we had 3 companies. We're only subtracting controlling interest from 1. So basically, this is saying, in the case that it's USMF as the company, take our net income times 10% to get to our non-controlling interest line. And I haven't changed anything with the column definition. So same column definition. And here's where you can see that summary USMF. So that reporting unit, that's what was used in that if-then statement on the row definition. So only for this particular company will we calculate that controlling interest. And then, let's see, actually there was one more thing to point out on the row definition. The other thing to highlight here is on the column restriction is I only want this amount to generate on columns E and J of that column definition, and those were the total columns. So that's when we'll see this amount actually be generated. So I'm setting some print control or restricting the columns in which this is applied. There is another way we can do this as well. The reason this was specified as a calculation here is because it's only, I'm applying it, I want to see it as a separate line on the income statement. If I didn't want to see it as a separate line, I do have another way that I could achieve the same thing, and that's in the tree definition. So here are the different companies. There is a roll-up percentage that could be applied to the row. So for this Contoso Entertainment Manufacturing, which is our USMF company, I could put a roll-up percentage here of 90%, and it would achieve the same total, but I wouldn't see that as the 10% as a separate line subtracting out from net income. So that's the difference. And I'll generate this report so you can. So here we have, let me scroll down, and we can now see our non-controlling interest, and it's only generated, remember on, we have set the restriction to E and J, so here I can see the total, so it's 10% of USMF, looks to be accurate, and then that's being subtracted out and restricting which rows it's printing on. And of course, like any other, you can drill into specific details to see more information. All these reports, of course, have the same capabilities from a drill down perspective, drill into AX perspective. But this just a couple examples of how you could achieve some of the consolidation requirements just as a reporting function. So once this report is created, it's just a matter of generating it to see the results and doing what-if analysis, etc. So those are 3 examples. Go back to the PowerPoint. So what we just looked at from a minority ownership standpoint is we could use a roll-up percent in the reporting tree. Again, that would just summarize the amounts to 90% of the overall total. We did it as a separate line in order to show it as a separate line in calculated amount, and we used an if-then statement or calculation in the row definition, and we chose which specific columns that we wanted that calculation to be applied to. So next we're going to go into some more advanced scenarios around consolidations and bringing in information from outside systems or subsidiary information outside of Microsoft ERP. So Jill.
Thanks. For consolidating outside of Dynamics AX, when we think about it, there's one or more of ERPs, so you could have AX 2009, AX 2012 pulled into a single report. If you've got GP, you can pull in GP and AX and 2009 all together on a single report. If there are, again, the multiple versions. And then also if there's information, what we're going to focus on is outside of the ERP. It could be a recent purchase. They haven't rolled their systems into Dynamics AX yet. It could be some historical information that they want to still make sure is included. As long as that information can be put out into Excel, Management Reporter can pull it into a report. So we're going to walk through the steps on how to create a report that's pulling in information from an Excel file. The first thing that you'll notice, I opened up the report definition for this particular report, is that my row definition is grayed out. And the reason that it's grayed out is we are going to specify in our reporting tree which Excel file we want to use. And so we need to make sure we go to the reporting tree to pull that information. First, though, we need to actually say the cells and reference things on what we want to pull into the Management Reporter report. So we'll open up our row definition. I'm going to go ahead and hide my navigation pane. And you can see here that I have my column J is my link to financial dimensions column. And what that is, again, is going back to Dynamics AX, and it's pulling in my dimension or my main account information here. So I've got some ranges created here with that. And again, it's going to my USMF company. But I also have a column K that is a link to an external worksheet. You can have multiple links to external worksheets. You can have, there's a couple of different ways to bring in this information. I can either double click on the header of that column and it will pull up a row links dialog. Or I can use the icon up in the toolbar for row links. And you can see here I've got a link name, and its link type is financial dimension. So again, that's going to go back to Dynamics AX and pull in those balances from Dynamics AX. But I also have a second link, and this link type is an external worksheet. If I go ahead and click the drop down here, you'll see that I've got a few different types of link types. I've got the financial dimensions, the external worksheet, which is what we're looking at right now. But there's also, financial dimensions plus worksheet. So you can combine them into a single column if you'd like. And this is really more for not a consolidation scenario, but more for if you've got some statistical information, you've got some budget information maybe that you want to bring into a report that you can bring in inline. So it's on a different row than your financial information. You can also link to another Management Reporter report. So if you've got reports that are detailed that you want to roll into a summary, more of a summary information, not necessarily consolidated, but multiple reports that have details on them you want to pull into a different report, you can link to a Management Reporter report to do the same thing. So we're going to focus on this external worksheet. You'll also notice that I don't have in this dialog anywhere, I haven't said where the worksheet actually is, and we'll do that in the reporting tree. So that was the key to that checkbox on the report definition, is that will be defined per company in our reporting tree. For each of the rows in my row definition, I'll say which cell I want to pull from in that Excel worksheet. So if I pull up my workbook here, you can see that I've got, it looks similar in layout to the report itself. And it doesn't have to look this way, it can be strictly data. But the one thing to note here is if I go back into my row definition, you can see I've got A5. So for sales, I'm doing A5. And then I've got a /CPO. And what that code is doing is it's a column period offset. What it will do is it will take A5 and start the next column over, because you'll see A5 is actually my description. And I don't want to pull in the description, I actually want to pull in each period specific period information. And what it'll do is it will keep moving columns over based on my reporting period, my base period when I generate the report. So I can have 12 months worth of data in a single spreadsheet and not have to link multiple times or create multiple row definitions, go in and update my cell references. I don't need to do any of that. By using this code, Management Reporter will know what period to pick up that information for. And so it's just a matter of then putting in each of the cell references that's appropriate for that line in your report. The column definition is a little bit different. You'll see that we do still have our description column. We also have our financial dimension column. So again, this is going to be pulling in information from Dynamics AX. My reporting unit, I've restricted it to the company that I have in Dynamics AX. And then for my other two companies, my type now is, my column type is now WKS. And that's telling Management Reporter this information is in an external worksheet, so go to that worksheet for this particular column. And you can see here that I can still specify base for my period, and that's how it will move across that spreadsheet for me based on my report date. And again, I've got this restricted to that particular, sorry about that, that particular unit of the reporting tree. In the reporting tree itself, I have the 3 units plus the summary, so what's being rolled up. Since these companies aren't in Dynamics AX, for the company code on those is just @any. So it really doesn't, it's not going to be pulling that information from AX, so I don't need to put in an AX company. I can just use @any, and it will ignore the company setting for this particular row. My row definitions, when I open up the dialog here, you'll see a list of all of the row definitions that are created in Management Reporter. And I need to tell the tree to use the row definition that has that link that knows, so that we know which cell references to pull from. So I've got my summary income statement with external worksheet is my row definition. My financial dimensions link I don't need to do anything with. We'll actually talk about that in a little bit. But my worksheet link is where I need to spend my time and pick something here. So if I open up this dialog, you can see here that this is actually the ID of that link that's in the row definition. So if we go back to the row definition quickly, and when I open up the links dialog, you'll see that this is the CEA and CEE. That's what's pulling into my reporting tree. So that's what's telling it to use the cell references that I have in this column for this particular row or company in my reporting tree. And I've done that for both of these reporting units. And then I give it a path out to that particular workbook. And it can either be separate, they can be separate workbooks, they can be a single workbook with multiple sheets in it. So just depending on how you've got your data extracted out of whatever the other system is and into Excel, you can do either one of those. One thing to keep in mind here, in this case, we've got a drive in here, so it's going to the C drive. Everything's all installed locally on here. I'm an admin. The process service user, which is the user that actually does the generation of the reports, has access to everything. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that the process service user that does the report generation piece needs to have access to this location in order to pull in the appropriate information. So that's just something to keep in mind with that one. And then when I look at that report, you'll see now I've got this report was generated, if I go to my show headers, for December. And I've got my Contoso Entertainment. So this column is pulling from Dynamics AX. This column is pulling from my Excel spreadsheet. So if I go to December, you'll see that December number now is pulling in. It's pulling in column M, actually. So that's where that offset, again, comes from. I put an A5, and since I generated it for December, it went over that many columns and picked the December column. And then it's simply the total is a consolidated, a calculated column, like Heidi was showing earlier in the column definition, just a simple adding those 3 columns together. So the steps here had a little bit more in them, and you have to take a look at and examine your Excel spreadsheet to get the cell references. So we're creating an Excel file containing the data from a non-Dynamics ERP or some other source. We added a new row link in the row definition to use that link to external worksheet, and we gave it an ID and a name. Then we added those cell references to the rows in the row definition, and we included that CPO code to make sure that it would go across our worksheet. If you only had a single column worth of data, if you were doing it on a monthly basis and you would just download a month's worth of data, you wouldn't have to do the CPO. You would just do whatever that cell reference was. So in our case, we could have done B5 or M5, whatever that period information that I want to pull in. The row definition, with the column type again, was the type of WKS. So that means lets Management Reporter know these amounts are coming from a worksheet. We indicate that the row definition, external link, and that file location for each one of those units in the reporting tree. So in our case, we have a fairly small reporting tree, but you could mix and match. You could have 5 companies coming from AX and 5 companies coming from Excel spreadsheets, and you just have to do those same steps for each of those units in the reporting tree. And then in our column definition, we had use the row definition from the reporting tree. So again, it's telling Management Reporter, I've got links defined, I've got cell references defined, go to the reporting tree to get that information to pull into a report. You have a question?
Yeah, can you get the company logo in one report?
The question was about the company logo per report per company.
In a single report, have multiple logos against each company if you're showing a consolidated report.
Right. It's one logo per report, basically. So you aren't able to put them on each of the columns. If that's something that is interesting to you, put in a suggestion, and we can take a look at it and respond appropriately.
If external worksheet is in the form of a trial balance, still will it pull up the data from the external worksheet to the consolidation?
The question is if the external data is in the form of a trial balance, as long as you have the cell references to the appropriate line, it doesn't matter what format the Excel spreadsheet is in. It doesn't have to look like a report like mine did. It can be just data. And as long as you have the appropriate cell reference for the period that you want to pull from, it doesn't really matter what it looks like. The next scenario that we're going to take a look at is the multiple chart of accounts. So this can be if you have one or multiple ERPs. So you could have the same scenario where you've got GP and AX, you've got AX 2009 and AX 2012, which the chart of accounts may not be exactly the same. And then we're pulling that information into a single report in Management Reporter. So you can see here, this report looks a little bit different. We've done some different formatting in here, but we've got 2 companies, each in a specific column. And in this case, our companies have a different chart of accounts. Again, we're going to be creating multiple links in our row definition. So that link to the column J and column K that we did with our pulling in from an external worksheet. That same concept is going to apply when we create a report that has multiple chart of accounts, because we'll have multiple link to financial dimension columns that's appropriate for that given company. I'm going to go ahead and unselect that so we can open it up. So in this case, you see we've got our column J, again, is pulling in from one particular company. And then we have column K, which we've created, which is also, again, I just double-clicked on the header to open up my row links dialog. And in this case, we've got 2 link to financial dimension columns in our row definition. And you can have as many as those as are necessary. If you've got 15 companies and they all have a different chart of accounts, which would be horrible. Can't even imagine. But you could have 15 columns in here and try and manage that as well. So in this case, we give it a name, so it's easy to identify when we actually go into our row definition. So one thing to keep in mind, and it's something that we are getting feedback on, is when I'm creating these multiple links to financial dimension columns, when I go in and select, for example, I open up my dimension dialog, it is looking at the company that I currently have set as default, right? So in this case, it's looking at USMF. Now, in some cases, people know what those are going to map to, and their main account is main account. It's going to be main account across both, but 401, 100 in USMF is different in CEED. But I know what the mapping is, so I can just type it in. So when I'm looking at creating a row definition, if I just start typing a number in here, it assumes main account for me, and it will automatically add that appropriate syntax to that line. If you don't know or the customer doesn't know what those accounts that are mapping to, what you would need to do is you create your report with your link to financial dimensions to the one company, save the row definition, close it, change your company, and reopen it, and then continue building using a new link to financial dimensions column, because then it will be looking at the appropriate chart based on the default company. So that's something to keep in mind, and it is something that we've heard feedback on. It would be nice if I could just pick what company in here, and it would know the chart without me having to close the row definition and reopen it. The question is, what's the...
Why not just use the consolidation account feature?
The question is around the consolidation account feature in AX. You could do that as well. It's a matter of what detail level that you want to see, because in here, what you'll be able to do when I drill down, I'll see all of the transactions specific to that account, right? So it's just a matter of what level of detail you want to be able to get to when you generate your report. My column definition is actually it's just a simple periodic year-to-date column. I've got my, each one of, again, we're using that reporting unit restriction. When we look at the reporting tree, it's similar to the previous reporting unit, reporting tree that we looked at, in that we are creating our row definition here. We're specifying what our row definition is here, and then we are using, in this case, this one was built CEU and CED, but the same would apply. I've got my financial dimensions link. If I open this up, I've got those 2 links that we had, so column J and column K are pulling in, and then I just use the appropriate link for the appropriate company, and it will know what information to pull in. So very similar. The process is the same across whether you're bringing in data from Excel or if you've got multiple charts that you're dealing with. So the steps here that we walked through were creating a second link to financial dimensions in the row definition for each of the unique charts. And again, give it a friendly name so you know what company it is when you're creating your reporting tree. Mapping the accounts to the appropriate lines. So similar to the same process that you go through on mapping your cells in Excel to the specific line. Keeping in mind that you may have to close the company and change companies if you aren't sure what accounts map to a line. Selecting the row definition and the reporting tree definition so we know what set of accounts to use, and then choosing that row link for each of the reporting units. The next scenario that we're moving into is the reporting currencies and consolidation. And this was what Heidi had mentioned that was new in CU7, was being able to pull in that translated information into a consolidated report and into a report. And it's really about any report. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a consolidated report. It's any report and any currency in the web viewer itself. So the exchange rate types and the default rate types are all defined in Dynamics AX based on the account. The companies are translated to the accounting currency of the selected company. And then again, you switch that view in the web viewer if you'd like. Or in some cases, we've had customers that have requested being able to see those currencies side by side in specific columns instead of switching the view. If we go first, we'll take a look in AX at where those currencies are defined. So we've got our exchange rate types that are included in here. And then on our main accounts, if I were to look at my bank account, for example, there's an area now for management report or currency translation. So you select the exchange rate type, and then you select the currency translation type. And then based on that information is how that report is then generated in Management Reporter with the appropriate currency. There's, in the report definition, there are a couple of different ways that you can think about as someone who's actually generating the reports, how you want to surface those things up to users. So you can see on the report definition itself, there's an option here that says include all reporting currencies. And what that will do is pre-generate those views, those currency views for whoever is viewing those financial reports. If this is unselected, that view is generated at request time or at runtime. Whenever that person wants to changes the view, then those calculations happen at that time. So it really depends on what experience your users expect when they are looking at those financials. So if we open this one up, and this is one that Heidi had shown earlier, you can see here there isn't any information if I go into currency. US dollar is what's default for this particular company. If I change to euro, it will load euro, and you can see that the number has changed, the values have changed, and now I have an indicator here that this is now displaying in euro. And I can do that for any one of these companies, and there really wasn't anything special that I had to do. It was just a matter of putting those currency translation types and exchange rate types in AX. In Dynamics AX. These automatically come through, and I'm able to view this report in any currency that I'd like. But in some situations, like I mentioned, there are times where people want to be able to view those reports, view those currencies side by side. So we've taken the same basic consolidation report, and instead of having going to the currency menu to view those, I have them listed side by side here in separate columns so that you can see what they look like in that type of view. In the column definition, so my row definition hasn't changed, my reporting tree hasn't changed. In my column definition, originally this particular report had a single FD column, so we've got our description column, and then we had a single FD column that was looking just at everything across all currencies. So in this case, I can either do my currency display here, I can either set it to the functional, or I can set it to reporting. So you can see here I've got my USD as my functional currency, so that's what I'm going to have this column filtered to, and then I can choose any of those then reporting currencies for those particular columns, and it will display then in those particular currencies. So pretty simple steps to get that additional information. So from the consolidate with the reporting currencies, it's select that reporting currency in the web viewer. It's a simple flip of the view, or choose the currency display in the column definition to see those multiple currencies side by side. Some of the other consolidation scenarios include things like the being able to pull in information from Dynamics AX 2009. different fiscal periods, consolidating by business unit, and we'll go ahead and take a look at the consolidate by business unit scenario. For I would say almost all of the scenarios that we walked through today, if you were in the session before, Heidi had mentioned the management reporter, the CPM blog. There's a whole series that walks through step by step, basically everything that we've done here today to do all of the same consolidation type scenarios. And then we'll also be doing at Convergence, diving deep into some of these other scenarios as well and adding some additional. So if you're going to Convergence, you can check us out there too. From a business unit perspective, really all the business unit is adding another dimension onto the reporting tree. So you can see we've got some basic, this is a basic income statement again here. If I look at my reporting tree, I'm at the consolidated level. If I go to human resource, legal, I don't have any expenses here. I don't have any revenue here. I've just got my expenses. But now I'm seeing a roll-up of multiple France, USA, and this company all rolling up into a single business unit. And I've gotten that across all of my business units for those 3 companies. So it's a matter of combining the reporting tree, those multiple company rows in my reporting tree, with rows that have business units specified in them. So this one gets a little bit trickier to create, obviously, because we're adding in, instead of just having our 3 rows for our France, for USA, and for German, I think this one might be, pulling in. Now I'm adding in a dimension to that. And each of the dimensions are the same. In this case, they're the same across. So my department or my is the same across. So I've got 026 to 027. I could create a dimension value set for those and have them use that across as well. Just go to all of them. So I could go in here and create a dimension value set that groups those together, and then I could also use that dimension value set across other multiple reports if I had either for a single company or for different types of scenarios. I could then use that grouping again in a row definition if I wanted to. So really depending on how you want to view that data. And then once you have each of these lines, it can be a copy-paste down as far as the departments go. So that's what I did when I created this one. I created my first row, and then I just copied and pasted down into each one of these individual cells. One thing to keep in mind is this unit name. So we've seen the unit name used multiple times across our session today in Heidi used it in the minority interest. She used the summary, and it had a caret, then USMF. This is where that is pulling from, is this unit name. And the unit name has to be unique. That's basically the only thing in this reporting tree that has to be unique. So if you do have departments that either have the same name or same type of information in them, this isn't tied back into anything that's in Dynamics AX. It's strictly in Management Reporter. So you can name them, as far as the unit goes, anything that you want to name them to keep them unique moving across. Same with the unit description, and then this information from the dimensions column is what's pulling into that's what's pulling in from Dynamics AX. You can see for each of the summary type units, we're just using @any because it's just going to roll everything up. We don't need to have it be for a specific company. It will just roll everything up into that @any company. That's another tip. If you're using @any on the report definition, it will use whatever your default company is for the data in that report. Yes?
I would imagine the same rule applies if you're in the default company and the financial dimensions are different in the other companies. You would only see the default company financial dimensions.
Yeah, the question is about the financial dimensions for the default company. Like with the chart of accounts example, the same would apply. It's going to be whatever the default company's dimensions are, the dimension values are what you're going to see in here. And then that's how you'd have to flip between if you wanted to add others, or if you had them out in Excel, you could copy and paste them into whichever way you want to do that. So that was a look at the Consolidate by business unit. So again, if you were in the previous session, this is a plug for the blog. We try to submit things weekly. It's kind of what our goal is, to make sure that we keep things up to date and fresh. Anytime we come across an interesting scenario, questions that we get from you, we'll take back, mock up in a report, and do a blog on it. Because if one person asks, more than likely we have other people that are asking the same questions. We also use a lot of the content out here is questions that we get from people. We then will build sessions around that. So things like the session today was actually, the concept came from the blog series on consolidations. Training material, feature videos, the download, although if you're installing AXCU7, it will have an option to install Management Reporter with it as well. Be sure to finish the evaluations, and Heidi, if you want to come back up, we can answer any questions that you have. Excuse me? The address to the blog is blogs.msdn.com, WAC-B, WAC, Dynamic CPM. It's actually, I believe that everybody will get the deck, and that slide, those are hot links. So you'll be able to get to all the specific links in there. Yep. Yes?
I noticed that your data is significantly better than the data in the VPCs that are currently available. Can we expect some richer data in the release of the R3 VPC along the lines of what you've got?
The question is related to the demo data? Yeah. We've, our team in particular, we go in and post transactions to build the reports that we want to be able to show. I know that there's been a lot of work done on the demo data, so it's been continually improving, and I don't know, Heidi, if you have anything to add.
I'll say that it's being extended for the new areas or new capabilities in the system. As far as major overhaul, that's not planned for R3. So if you still have feedback on the data as it is today, we should.
Can we expect to see consolidation reports in the demo data, not the actual data itself, but the reports that we can run?
I know that we have, I had to get back to you on that, because I know that another member of our team has been working with the team that builds the VMs, and I'm not sure if those scenarios have been included on the VMs or not. But as far as creating those and making sure those reports are out there, that's a fairly easy thing to do. It's just as long as we get in the window, basically.
Yeah, it's good feedback.
Yeah.
I didn't catch the question correctly the first time, so we'll take that. We should be able to do that quite.
Right.
We also do have a focus room. I believe it's Wednesday after the Ask the Experts session, where Jill and I will be there with other members of BI and reporting, and the office interop. So if you have questions related to SSRS, OLAP cubes, all of the different analysis tools, there'll be a focus room that you can stop by and get your questions answered as well.
Yes?
So the majority of the consolidations you showed today were using the reporting tree.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any functionality to use the organizational hierarchy within Dynamics AX as opposed to building the reporting tree?
So the question is about using the organization hierarchy instead of building a reporting tree. If you've got an maybe you can talk to Yeah.
Yeah, if you have an organization hierarchy of legal entities, I mean, the org hierarchies will synchronize. So if it's that basic scenario, certainly, yeah.
Yes?
Are there any plans to have a graphical picture of the report? So once you've created your P&L, have a tab where you can just view it in a graph. I know you get into the Power View mode. But
Go ahead.
I was going to say, the question was, let me make sure I got it correctly. When you're in report design, to be able to see the report output like side by side, is that what you're asking?
as a graph.
As a graph.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go with it.
Sure. You're going to be mad at me. There's so currently we do. So you saw the web viewer today. We do have a client viewer as well. There is some capabilities in there to build charts related to the data for the reports or add charts to it. We have not added that to the web viewer yet. We're not certain that customers are using the charts from a report design perspective. So if that's something that people are using, we'd love to hear about it, because at this point, we really didn't have any intention of bringing those charts through to the web viewer.
Yeah. What we see is people take the reports, they'll generate them, they'll download to Excel, and then they'll use the charting in Excel to get whatever kind of charts that they want.
Yeah, if you're publishing to XPS and just sending it off.
Right. Yep. That's a good scenario. Yep.
Then having graphs for people.
Yeah.
Yeah. The follow-up was if you were creating an XPS from that and you were sending off that package, it would be nice to have the graphs in the XPS package as well. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good.